Hello again team, it's Jess or JashiiCorrin, and today we're looking at layouts you can include in your monthly setup. I've got 50 ideas for you today, though likely a few more as I'll probably mention some more as we go through, but I'm going to be writing down the 50 main ideas for my own reference in my long-term collections bullet journal. The idea for the layouts I list here is that they are all pages you could set up every month, rather than one-off collections. As I write these out, I'm going to have some pictures of ideas for each layout from Instagram, some being pictures of my journal and some being pictures from other awesome bullet journalists. So if any of the spreads you see piques your interest, do make sure that you go and check those accounts out. A slight disclaimer to start, I don't recommend you set up every single one of these layouts in your monthly setup. 1, that's a lot to set up. 2, that's a lot to keep up with in terms of filling things in. And 3, the function of some of these layouts are fairly similar, so having all of them would likely make some a little bit redundant. As we go through though, if you find today's video useful or even just interesting, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on more videos from me. Without further ado though, let's look at some ideas. For the following ideas, I've put them into some general categories, just to keep this video organised. And the first category we have are calendars and schedules. And the first idea we have for this one is the monthly log. It'd be a tad silly if I didn't mention it, so I figured we'd talk about it sooner rather than later. You can, of course, have a monthly log in your monthly setup. Who would have thought it? Both vertical and calendar styles are good, but some people get really creative with theirs as well. The next idea is themed schedules, and this is something that can be used in multiple ways. Sometimes it can be just helpful to pull out all the events, tasks, etc. for one thing into their own calendar or schedule. I personally like to do this with my social media schedule, but you can of course use this idea for work, school, extracurriculars, a project you're working on, etc. Our next category is for trackers and logs. The way that I like to differentiate them is that trackers are where I'm just checking things off or colouring in boxes, while logs are where I need to write down words. It's a loose point of difference, but it helps me distinguish between them. However, because these terms are so often used interchangeably, I've put them together for this category. This makes our third idea habit trackers, which are one of my favourite page types to include in my monthly setup. They're certainly a staple for me. I do have a separate video on different styles of habit tracker, and an updated version of that video is planned for the end of the coming month. Similar to the themed schedule idea, sometimes it can be helpful to have certain habits batched into their own tracker as well. Examples for this include things like any kind of routines, so morning, evening, skincare, etc. Habits for a certain goal or project. For instance, my habit tracker for the month coming is entirely focused on habits to help me develop a better relationship with food. Mood trackers are typically the layout in my setups where I have the most fun and get to be the most decorative. Of course, these can be set up in a more simple way, but normally I like to do mine using doodles that are related to my monthly theme. Productivity trackers and logs can be an awesome addition if you want to keep track of getting things done. I have a separate video on the layouts you can see in the pictures here, so if you are curious to know how they work, make sure to check that video out. Any additional video that I mention in this one can be found in the description box below. A cleaning or chores tracker is a common example of a themed tracker. These typically differ to regular habit trackers, as you don't necessarily want to do all of these tasks every day. Some you might want to do twice a week, or once a month, etc. So having a separate tracker for these things can be helpful. I've combined the idea of a meal log and planner together, just as they fill a similar function. One you just fill in after the fact, and one you fill in before. This can be particularly helpful for those of us who are trying to be a bit more mindful in our food consumption, for anybody who needs to track the intake of food related to any symptoms, or maybe it's just so that when we look at our bank accounts, we have a better idea of what that $10 charge last Tuesday was actually for. The next idea is health logs and trackers, whether it be mental or physical. There are a lot of different ways you can set up a layout like this, and heaps of different things to include on it. Water intake, working out, steps, mindfulness, meditation. The list goes on, and on, and on. Next we have family trackers, and this one is really just a catch-all for a couple of different tracker ideas. Really just depending on what it is you want to track. The two examples I have here are for pets, but people also do trackers and logs for their kids, relationship trackers with their spouse and other family members. I've seen a couple of newborn baby logs and trackers around recently as well. This one is sometimes referred to as an expense log, but it's essentially a space to record how much you spent during the month and on what. The difference between this one and a budget is that budgets often involve making estimates or setting targets for spending. Or rather not spending. The next idea we have is for a screen time tracker, but really this could be for any numerical metric. So steps, water intake, in my case, how many cans of Coke Zero did I drink today, could be how many dogs you saw, any kind of tracker that uses numbers. The power of gratitude is talked about a lot nowadays, but I also do know that I always feel a little better when I make it a focus to think about the things that I'm grateful for. So why not include a gratitude log in your monthly setup? It can be more decorative or just a word or phrase for the day, but it pays to look for positivity where we can. The next idea is a dream log. Depending on how often you dream or how much detail you want to include, this one could take a variety of forms. I know that some people actually have full journals dedicated to their dreams, which I think is really cool. I am a big fan of tiny wins, and the idea that small steps add up to big progress. One of the pages you can include that follows that idea is a tiny wins log, so recording one small thing from the day that was successful. Improvement logs or trackers are a space to write down or record what could have made the day better. Ideally, you'd then take that feedback moving forward to the next day and actually try to make that improvement. The next idea is a self-love log. My version of a self-love log was my I am page. So each day in a month, I wrote down one word or phrase that described me, making sure that I was keeping it positive. A self-care bingo page is something that I've very much come to enjoy in my monthly setups. The idea is that you set up a bingo board of your desired size, and then fill it with self-care tasks and activities that you try and do throughout the month. As you complete them, you colour them in or cross them off the board. The next idea are time trackers and logs. These could either show just the totals of how much time you spent doing different things, or show specifically when you were doing certain tasks. This is an example of a specific type of time tracker, where you only focus on one thing. So essentially, when or how much you slept. You can also include other information, like how well rested you were afterwards, any other metrics that you might have from things like a sleep monitor or Fitbit, etc. I know I've specified one line here, but you can of course do 2, or 3, or more, or less. This could include things like today I learned, it could be a memory of the day, a random act of kindness that you did for someone, etc. This brings us to our next category, which are goal-related layout ideas. As I mentioned before, you don't necessarily want to have every single one of these ideas in your monthly setup, just as you'd likely end up doubling up on information. But our first idea for this category is a monthly goals list. A fairly straightforward idea, but this is just a place to write down your goals for the month ahead. A similar idea is a bucket list or make it happen page. I've combined these ones as they kind of fit a similar purpose. It's a page where you write out some of the specific things you want to do or to tackle in the month coming. So not necessarily goal related, but just things you want to do. A good way to make sure you're actually doing things to work on your goals is by writing a monthly action plan. Depending on the goals you have, these could take various forms, but essentially it's a place to write down all the steps you want to take in order to bring you closer to achieving your goals that month. Of course, it's also good to celebrate our wins, so you might also want to have a space to record any milestones. The examples I have here are for social media milestones, but you can also record non-numeric milestones on a monthly basis too. Our next category are all ideas related to tasks and to-dos. So idea 26 is a monthly or master task list. This is a place to write down all your tasks and to-dos for the month, in particular those that don't necessarily need to be done on any day specifically. Similar to our other themed ideas, you can of course have a themed task list. So for instance, things to read, check out, to buy, to pack, things to do for XYZ. The list of possible lists is pretty much endless. Our next idea, a place of infinite possibility, a brain dump is a space for anything. Most people like to use them for to-dos, reminders, or notes, but it can also be used for journaling, doodling, etc. The way I like to look at it is that this is a space for whatever your brain needs. You can of course include weekly or daily logs in your monthly setup. Some people like to set these up at the start of the month as part of their regular monthly setup, while some of us like to set these up week by week as we go. If you have a particular project with a lot of things to keep track of, having a project planning page as part of your setup could also be a good idea. This could be in the form of a Kanban board, or just a running list, or anything else. Something that wouldn't necessarily be for every month, but that I've included in my monthly setups previously, are experience planning pages. These could be for trips, parties, social gatherings, or really any kind of activity. It can also be good to have a dedicated note space. These could be themed notes, for instance, book notes, class notes, life notes, lessons learned, etc. Or it could just be a catch-all space for notes in general. You can also have dedicated journaling pages in your bullet journal, a space to write out your thoughts, feelings, or whatever else you want to journal about. Another idea is to have a space for ideas. You'll likely see this a fair bit with content creators, having a space for posts or video ideas. But this doesn't have to be limited to just these things. It might be ideas for different recipes you want to try, experiences you want to have, knitting projects to explore. Completely depends on what you want to collect ideas for. The next category I've called Just for Fun, and it's for any ideas that aren't so much productivity or goal driven, but more because they're enjoyable to put in. The first idea for this section is a decorative page. This could be done with doodles, stickers, a collage, however it is you like to decorate. Some people like to also stick colouring pages into their journal, which is another idea for this type of page. You can also have a cover page for your monthly setup. I sometimes like to call this a splash page, but I find it nice to have a page to introduce the new month. I find it especially helps with that kind of fresh slate feeling. They can be arty and decorative, they can be simple and straightforward. There is a lot you can do with pages like this. I love including quotes in my journal, especially those that I can relate back to my monthly themes. These are a great way to use an extra page, or to have a reminder or encouragement for yourself in your journal. Another fun page idea are monthly challenge pages, so doodling challenges, lettering challenges, or maybe a more personal challenge, like savings or decluttering. Something nice to look back on in the future would be things like memory pages. People typically put in things like pictures, journaling, ticket stubs, etc., and these can be such lovely snapshots of moments from the month. Positive statements that can help you challenge and overcome self-sabotaging and negative thoughts. And yes, I did look up that definition online. A page for your affirmations can be helpful to make you focus on self-positivity. Some people like to use this as a space to write down an affirmation daily, while others like to write these out at the start of the month for reference later. You'd be tied to your monthly theme in some way, or just some of your favourite songs from the month. A word of the month page is just what it sounds like, a page dedicated to a word for the month. How you select this word is up to you. It could be a word that you've just learnt recently, or maybe a theme that you're trying to embody throughout the month. Technically, when I've done these pages, they've been more goal related, but I still decided to include it in this section. With that said, this naturally brings us to the next section, which is all about reviewing the month that I actually had a really hard time finding any pictures for, but what you do is that at the end of the month, note down any memorable things that happened around the world in the month that was. This is something that I did at the end of last year as kind of a year in review, but this could easily be turned into something monthly. Another page I quite enjoy is a media consumed layout. This is where you write down things like movies and TV shows you watched, games you played, songs you enjoyed, books that you read, podcasts, etc. Another fun snapshot kind of idea is a monthly favorites page, where you write down anything you really enjoyed for the month, whether they be journaling related or otherwise. I put this idea here as it didn't really fit so well anywhere else, but you can of course have a budget page. This is where you'd set money related targets for the month, and at the end of the month, ideally reflect on how well you met or stayed under those targets. Another page type that I've quite enjoyed using previously is monthly theme planning pages. I used to put these at the end of one month, just before the next, as a space to plan out the layouts that I wanted to include, lettering styles to use, colour palette, etc. One of the things I love about keeping my past journals is that they essentially offer me a snapshot of what my life was like at any given time. A layout that follows this idea is a currently page, where you list out what you're currently enjoying, hoping, loving, reading, watching, playing, eating, etc. From Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Morning, comes idea number 49, a level 10 life check-in page. This is where you rate yourself out of 10 for the different areas of your life. In his book, he does define 10 categories to do this in, but I find it more suitable to pick my own. Everyone's life is different. At the end of the month, it can also be good to have a space to reflect on the month that was. A place to record achievements, challenges, special memories, intentions moving forward, whatever it is that's helpful for you to focus on. If you wanted some ideas for that, I do also have a video about different monthly review layouts. Our question for the day for you guys though, what layouts do you consistently put in your monthly setup? For me, my habit tracker is a staple, while others phase in and out from month to month. I hope you enjoyed all these monthly layout ideas, and if you have any more, do make sure to let us know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, team. If you liked today's video, please do make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel to see more on planning, productivity, and personal development. Until next time, bye!